as you can see behind me, we are full-time RVers. We bought this rig a couple of years ago, right before COVID, and our intention was to travel, go to places for 3 months, work, Sammy mentioned that we're climate reality leaders, so I wanted to go into communities, work with the local nonprofits, and give the presentations. But that kind of changed. We had to go to plan B, C, and D, as the year progressed. So, but we're still out here, but we park for 3-4 months at a time. So my background is varied, very, I started, I'm trying to think exactly how I got into this, but in the book I mentioned my childhood. I grew up in around St. Louis, not too far away from you guys, and my grandparents retired out of the city and went into the Ozarks, had a cabin out there in down by Steelville. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, on the Hoosier River. And there was a little state park there. I don't know if it was a state park when I was young, but it was a campground. But we spent every other weekend, we'd drive, over the river and through the woods to grandma's. And that's where I learned a lot about the outdoors and appreciation for it that I didn't know as a child. But now when looking back, I know that that's where it came from. And then I don't know, I just always cared about, had a passion for natural places, and especially for me, national parks and public lands. So my husband and I are very adventurous, as you can probably guess. And we picked up one day, we met in Tampa, Florida. This was in mid-'80s, and drove out to Utah to live in a very rural town. And that was the year that it was the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. I don't know, some of you may remember, they did a big Hollywood production. Bette Midler was Mother Earth. And we sat through that, and I think they were smart in picking Bette Midler because she was very popular at the time. We loved her, and I don't know, the show just convinced us that we needed to do something. So we were in this small rural community in northern Utah, and I think the population was 1,400. And we decided, back then, that recycling was a thing to do. That's what they were touting that year. And so we put an ad in the weekly newspaper to meet at the what do they call it? I guess like the firehouse. And we had 40 people show up. So they must have watched the show too. Wow. So we just divvied out, here you find out about glass, you find out about, aluminum. We just split up the tasks. We came back together. And we started a recycling center. So eventually the high school band took it over because they were invited to be in one of the parades, like the Rose Bowl parade, and they needed to raise money. So that was, I think, might have been the start for me. I also started recycling at Utah State University because I decided to go back to school in environmental studies, and then it's just one thing led to another. Ended up on the board of the National Recycling Coalition for a while, and rural recycling. We started a rural recycling segment, and after that ended up as a landfill superintendent. So I know all about the entire from resource end of it to the landfill end of it, as far as our resources go. So, like I said, it's been a very long journey. And then just ended up, I've always wanted to write. I always journaled. I've journaled my whole life. And just during COVID, I decided I'm going to sit down and finish this thing. I'm going to write it. I had this thing about doing things, weekly. If you break it into small steps, it's easier. So this is what came out of it, but well, then Al Gore came into our lives, right? I remember his first, when we lived in Alaska, Wayne and I moved to Alaska so I could get my master's in adult ed and distance learning. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
It's okay.
Because I also, when we lived in Colorado, I was the pollution prevention coordinator for Western Colorado. And if you're familiar with Western Colorado, there's a lot of mountains and rural places. And they sent me, I had to drive through the winter to these rural places. I said, there's got to be an easier way. The technology was there to do video like this in the boardrooms, right, at that point. So I said, well, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to learn how to do it so that people can stop traveling all over for meetings. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. So that's what I did. And Alaska accepted me, paid for my master's degree. So of course I had to go. And we ended up staying there for 12 years. So I learned a lot about climate change up there, working with rural communities, learning how the indigenous people weren't getting their subsistence fishing. The fish weren't coming back. The glaciers were melting. The polar bears were staying on land and just causing terror to the locals. And because I taught online courses to teachers in every borough in Alaska. So I heard all these stories, and it just, that environmental message just kept coming to me. So I, in a way, I think it found me. I didn't go after it because year after year, my life just tended to end up in that field. So I don't know. And then here we are. I don't know how I got here in the RV, but to say we downsized is, we sold everything. I mean, at that last year, when we did this in 2000, so in 2000, we sold a house in Colorado to move to Alaska. And I said, every time I'd go to the store, I said, will that fit in the trailer? Because we had a 19-foot trailer. That wasn't a very big house. So my buying habits stopped right then in the year 2000, because it won't fit in the trailer. I'm not buying it. And I still have that. But what's funny is about in September, I think it was, I ran a minimalist challenge on my Facebook. And that, if you've never done it, it's like day one, you get rid of one thing. Day two, you get rid of two things. And you think living in this small space, I wouldn't have anything to get rid of. But I got rid of, a couple hundred things, even after downsizing. So. And I have friends, they got rid of thousands of things, from their house. So anyway, I say there's a lot of stories, Sammy. I don't know where to stop or begin. Maybe you have questions for me.
That's what I was going to say. So this is, this group is pretty darned informal. So I don't know if anybody else that's on the call has any questions or anything that they want to know, have Sandi go into a little more detail so far. Just feel free to unmute yourself and speak up if there's anything more that anybody wants to know. Or you're welcome to put it in the chat too, and we can look at that. So, all right. Well, throughout this whole thing, just if someone has something that they want to add, or ask, just feel free. So how and when did it kind of come to you about writing the book? Like, I know you had started doing a weekly email blast, right? You had 52-week email blast, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago or something when you started that. And was it always your plan to make that a book, or kind of how did that whole idea come about?
That's a good question, but yeah, I've always wanted to write books. So I think years ago I read, there was a book, it said blog, it's called Blog the Book. So it's just an easy way. You start writing a blog. Maybe you watch that movie Julia and Julie, or
Yeah,
Julia
yeah.
Childs.
Mhm.
She blogged every day and, turned into a movie instead of a book. But anyway, it's just a concept. So I thought, well, weekly. And then I've always thought as an educator, giving people small bits so they're not overwhelmed, every week is an easier way to go for people, so we're so bombarded with negativity and lists. We were talking about the 10 ways to do something. Maybe giving a weekly challenge even, to make that change. And so they know even that little change is going to make a big difference around the world. So I guess, yeah, it started with the weekly list, which wasn't 52 to be. I just made it grow once I decided to write the book. That came first to test the waters, I guess. The weekly emails, and I still offer those. So.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, because books tend to end up on a shelf. So if you're reminded every week with an email, said, oh yeah, I need to do something this week. That's why I still offer it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's helpful to get that little reminder, and kind of something simple that you can just kind of keep at the back of your mind as you go about that next week or however often that might be. Yeah. So how easy or difficult was it to go through the publishing process, or the actual writing of it, or that whole, now you've made the decision, then what? Like, what'd that look like?
Well, it's self-published, of course, and more people are doing that these days, mainly because publishers don't really market for you, and they won't even look at you unless you've got a large list on social or email list, which I didn't have large list. So I went through the Amazon process. I've read the book probably 20 times, tweaking and you have to get the formatting just right. So the first 2 tests that I had, the formatting was off. So I've had to redo the book a few times. So it is, you have to be dedicated to get it printed. That's for sure. There's a lot more editing that happens, and you've probably heard, there's a lot more editing than there is writing, after you write it. And then now I'm ready to write another edition, of course. So
well, let's hear about that.
Well, I just want to, just keep it's constantly changing. I'd like to add maybe more of success stories that are going, I'd like to gather more success stories of what people are actually doing individually, and add some more stories throughout it, the book. And then, of course, there's other books I want to write.
Do you want to talk about them? I think stories would be wonderful, because I think that helps people really connect and see it from a lot of different perspectives, that maybe they can identify better with.
Mm-hmm. It's just getting those stories. But.
Mm-hmm.
The next one I'm working on, I said I've got a little national park habit. I don't know if you can see above me here, these two picture frames that hang over my back window. Those are pins from national parks that I've been to. I collect the little just pins. So we've been to about 45 national parks. I have I really love that concept of public land. So the next book is going to be on how climate change is affecting our national parks. You know, I know just, well, in Alaska, I witnessed a lot of, well, right now, I don't know if you know this, and if you've ever been to Denali National Park, there's a road that you have to take a bus, and it goes in like 90 miles into the wilderness. That's the only way you can get in and out is by their buses. So right now that 90 miles is cut off at about 32. It's a place called Polychrome, and it's just beautiful. The different shades of rock in the mountains, different types of rock, but they knew for many years that underneath, so they cut the road. There's a big cliff here and a road, and then down to the riverbed. That is a permafrost. There's permafrost under that, and every year they've been able to just kind of regrade the road. But this year that permafrost is moving at feet per day. So they've had to shut it down, and they think they may need to build a bridge now across the river and further down the road. It's not something that could be easily fixed now. So Denali is basically shut down at mile 32. You can't go. In fact, my recollection is, if I recall, you can't even see the mountain within the park from that road now, because you had to go way in. It's quite a bit further in to see the mountain. So that's quite devastating for Denali National Park. And then all of them, I went to Northern Cascades last year and talked to rangers there, and they're finding plastic particles up on the glaciers that are, you know, they're so fine that the wind is carrying them up and they're hitting the glaciers up there, which is harming, you know, wildlife. So, I mean, there's story after story of how climate change is affecting our national parks and treasures. So I think that'll be my next book. And I love to take pictures. So I've got a lot of photography, and then maybe mix in things, some more of the 52 ways and beyond of how we can make that stop. Because there's a big audience there's a lot of us that like national parks, and we don't want to see them go away. You know, like Joshua trees are dying. You wouldn't think that the desert could get too hot, but I'm here to witness that. I did witness that this year. And the rains. I'm in Tucson, by the way. And the monsoon season is in the summer months. So we got here in August at the end. And they had received, I think, 5 times more rain than normal this year. So it caused a lot of flood damage in the region. And the cactus just aren't used to that type of water either. So just, I think almost every park that is built, you know, any animal or plant based park, which most of them are, is being affected right now. So that's the next book I want to do.
That's going to be so important, Sandi. So, you know, I want to say what a great facilitator I am for this meeting. We haven't even mentioned the name of your book yet. So it's the Family Survival Guide for Our Changing Climate. Here's a copy of it. Yeah. 52 empowering actions you and your family can take now. So, okay,
It
so
might be
that we've done that.
backwards.
No, it's fine. You can read it. So, Anne, I saw you had unmuted a minute ago. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted maybe a little bit more background into the decision that you and your husband made to sell your house and most of your belongings. And I know you said you have a sense of adventure, but just really kind of maybe take us through that process and you know, the why and maybe some of the how, because I know it just seems to me like a daunting task to think about. So I'm always interested in hearing stories of people who've made that decision to either, you know, go into an RV or go into a tiny home or something, you know, sort of that process.
Well, I always joke. I said, if I was born, you know, a couple hundred years ago, I'd probably been on the Lewis and Clark boat or something. You know, I just like to go and explore, see new things. I don't know. It's just a natural part of me. I get bored when I'm, you know, even now I'm bored with it. We've only been here since August, but it's just a sense of adventure. And Wayne and I got married in '85 in Florida. And prior to that, I had even moved every 3 to 5 years in my adult life. We were there, I was there 5 years, he was there 10, but when we got married, the preacher actually said that I would follow him everywhere or anywhere. And I'm the one, he follows me. So it's just kind of funny, but I don't know. It's just, it's an innate need to explore and see new things, meet new people. But back in 2000, we were in Colorado. We bought a house there because every time we think, oh, well, this is the place, we're going to stay here. And I think it was about 5 years in, I wanted to, like I said, I was the pollution prevention coordinator working with the cities, the city level, the governments. And I just had a wild hair that to go back to school. I was looking at going over to Boulder, going to CU, and I didn't think I could make it in all those people. So it's funny, we went to the movies and on the screen, you know how they have the little ads at the beginning, was the University of Alaska promoting their master's program. So if that wasn't a sign, I don't know. I went home and I contacted them and they offered me a full scholarship and a job. So I think that it's hard to say no to that. So we went up, but we did stay up in Alaska 12 years. But that caused us, we didn't want to, back up a little bit. When you're shipping stuff to Alaska or out of Alaska, you can count on it's $1 per pound at that point. It's probably $2 per pound now. So we looked at every little thing, you know. I got a speaker here. If this is a pound, is it worth shipping it up there or just doing without? So especially the big furniture. So we got into the trailer. We didn't know. We didn't plan on living in an RV. We just knew we wanted to get a travel trailer and go up there and take our time. We had 3 months. So that was our first big adventure. And we got hooked, I guess. After that, we were in and out of that RV the whole time we were up in Alaska. We drove on every road, paved road that is in the state, which aren't many, but and I don't know, I don't know if you've studied minimalism at all, but you start to realize that your things own you more than you own them. And you don't need nearly what you think you need. And I truly believe that. Now, if I want to buy something, it's to replace something that I already have. In fact, if you buy a pair of shoes, when you live in an RV, you buy a pair of shoes, you got to get rid of a pair of shoes. So it's just become a lifestyle that I think even if we were to settle, I'd probably settle into a tiny home, you know, a little smaller space. So did that answer that?
Yes, thank you. That's great. I've only been to Alaska once, and it was for work. I was fortunate to be at Lake Minchumina, which is just west of Denali. So one day the mountain came out of the clouds, and so we got to see it. But I'd just be interested if you have any stories to share from your time there that are interesting. I know you shared a little bit about, I'm sure probably saw some pretty significant climate change up there, but if there's any kind of stories that you'd like to share from your time up in Alaska.
Oh, many, many, many stories. For like 10 years, we lived on Wasilla Lake, and it's a floatplain lake. And I worked from home. I've been self-employed since like 97. And it was funny because anytime there was distractions, you wouldn't believe the distractions of that lake. You know, we were facing north, so every night if you get up to use the restroom, you got to look out the window see if northern lights are out there, and there were quite often. And then during the day, in the spring, it would just transform. All the ducks would be migrating through, and swans, and you could just tell, you knew after a while what was coming next. Moose would wander in. One time I saw a moose in the summer, got in the lake and just went through and ate the flowers off of the lily pads, you know, walking across. And then the eagles constantly teaching their young to fish. We had a loon nest next to us. So, you know, they only have one, they lay one once a year. They mate for life, but when that egg hatches, the male announces it to the world. Believe me, it happened in the middle of the night, you know, so and it was just total distraction when I'm working, because there's always something. The eagle would catch a fish, and then the ravens would come in, or the seagulls would come in and try to, you know, battle over it, or it was amazing. But as far as I miss that, I really miss that, having that window. But there's, the mountain, it's very, very elusive. But so when we had a clear sunny day, you just take the day off. It's a day off. You have to drive north and see the mountain. And a lot of people did that. Or if the fish are in, you take the day off. It's a totally different life cycle. You know, right now, the sun's probably coming up at 10, going down at 3. This was the hardest time of year. And then in the summer, of course, it's light twilight all night long. So I do have, when we first got there, Wayne went fishing. He went down and he came back at 1. It was still daylight, you know, 1 in the morning. I said, well, where's the fish? You've been gone all night. He didn't know what time it was because the sun was out. So he makes joke of that. Just all the, you know, and then all the trips inside the park. You never know what you're going to see in there. A lot of grizzlies getting ready for winter. But so a lot of mine's nature related. We would just head out. Like I say, you kind of, it helped to be self-employed because you had to take advantage of it. You had to be ready to jump and go, you know, when it was there. because it's such a short window. But then at the end, the weather started changing. If it wasn't raining all summer, it was very smoky because wildfires up there are measured in millions of acres, not hundreds. So the smoke is just unreal. And it was getting like that every summer. Like I said, it would rain all summer or it would be smoky. And when you live there that long, you think, well, you survived the winter. I really wanted a good summer, you know. So eventually, yeah, we had to leave because it was just you need sunlight, right? I don't know.
Wow.
There's lots of stories. I want to write more about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you willing?
Yeah.
I have a question. Are you willing to share any of the tips that are in this book? Just give us a little tease.
Yes. I had thought, I've got, since it's the holiday season, and then I chose 3 out of here. Probably the last one is just like a pet peeve of mine, but it made it in there. As we enter this season, and I'm sure, I'm talking to the choir here, but experiences instead of stuff, that's something dear to my heart. I've been sharing that with my family for years now, because we don't all need another throw pillow or a blanket, which I see a lot of people buying. But so getting experiences instead of stuff. And one thing, you can think of the typical would be gift certificates for local events or restaurants or things like that, yearly passes, some performing arts centers or museums or, whatever. And it shows that you really know that person as well, instead of just picking something up at the store and giving them. But then so in the book, I go over, in the beginning of the book is an explanation of what a carbon footprint is. So everything we buy and everything we do has a carbon footprint. So to be conscious of that, it doesn't make sense. Well, I have a story about a coffee cup too. When we moved into the RV, my mom she loved to buy coffee mugs with names on them and give them to people. And I said, Mom, it will not fit in my RV. It will not. I have just the right amount of things in my cupboard. And you see, that is the only place I have for dishes, is that one cabinet right there. So she's, I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I just had to come down and say, if you want to get me something, get me, let's go do something together. Let's go have lunch. Don't buy me a coffee mug. Okay. So in that realm, then the activity is to, sit down with your calendar, know all your birthdays and anniversaries and times that you're going to buy gifts through the year. And just brainstorm of what type of things that person would enjoy. Instead of a thing, what kind of activity could you do with them, or what kind of, some kind of a pass, or maybe go to coffee with them, spend time with them. So this is a good time of year for that, especially if you get stressed out from the holiday shopping. Of course, I don't exclude art. I think buying things from local artists is an experience in itself. So that is one exception I have. And then another is decorating the landfill. That's the title of that chapter. And I think that came from my days of being a landfill superintendent and seeing what gets tossed. And then, it says here, just on holidays, the National Retail Foundation. So we spend an average of $215 per person on decorations for the winter holidays. So for the Christmas holidays, each person spends an average of $215. And then we jump right into Valentine's Day and buy another $136 per person, which a lot of that ends up in the landfill. So I've got some tips here. I've got 5 things to look for. What's the item made for? And again, looking at that carbon, the cycle, the life cycles. What's the footprint of that thing? Now the whole front, I do a whole chapter on the footprint of the book, and that kind of brings it home is, from extraction, the exploration, extraction, manufacturing, transportation, every little thing around you has that huge footprint. So the suggestion is to come up with ways, reusable holiday decorations. So build a kit. Maybe you have used cut flowers instead of, or get a potted plant instead of cut flowers. And then of course the gift could be an experience. Get rid of balloons and use maybe those rice paper lanterns, have those in your kit. Goodie bags, just don't buy, you've been to kids parties where you get this plastic bag full of plastic stuff that doesn't last more than 5 minutes. So maybe instead of that, have them decorate their own reusable water bottle, for example, or t-shirts. Have a party kit full of reusable, colorful tableware instead of buying the paper plates. A lot of those end up in the landfill. So the concept of having a tub, and I had tubs of things for office, office parties, reusable mugs, reusable plates, silverware that I picked up at the Goodwill store. Just had those available. And then another is my pet peeve is paper free vendors. And I don't know if, in the time when tabling comes back, I think some people are tabling already, but I'd go to these Earth Day events or the climate walks or whatever, and you go and the vendors would have tables full of paper, to hand out, or plastic bags to put the paper in, or it just didn't make sense to me. So I think coming in, I'm hoping this, when we get out of the pandemic, hopefully, and are able to have events again like that, just have large pictures of what you're doing with a QR code that sends them to a website where they can sign up so you can have communication with them. Because 9 times out of 10, that bag of paper flyers is going to end up tossed. They're not even going to look at it again. So to have that clutter, again, it's a minimalist thing, to remove that paper clutter and have an actual conversation and a place for them to go learn more. And then the imagery of your program, what is the visual image of what you're providing the public? So
Sandy, I have a story about that. I went to a conference, and it's been about 10 years, but I was going down the elevator in the hotel with a couple of women, and they literally took so much stuff from the vendors that they shipped it home. All the little hotskis and all that. They had gone to like all the vendors and gotten all their things and they shipped it home. And I just was like, I mean, because once in a while, there's something cool that I might use, that's practical. A lot of times it's kind of like the little kids gift bags from a party, and I just was floored. I just had never seen anybody grab that much, but they had these big boxes and they were going to ship it home. So.
Right. That
Crazy
happens a lot.
stuff. Yeah, crazy
But
stuff.
to have environmental groups sitting there doing that, it just doesn't make sense anymore. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Sandy, it looks like Brenda, you've been unmuted a while. Do you have something you wanted to ask or add?
Well, a couple of things have come to mind. I, in the past couple of months, was exposed to Annie Leonard and her video called Stuff, and it talks about the same thing that you have talked about, products and this whole cycle of consumerism that we're in, and how that was intentionally created in us, and just it's changed my way of thinking about literally every single thing. From the things we have in our house to the things we buy as holiday gifts, just so impactful. The other thing, when you were talking about the national parks, and I do think you're onto something there. A lot of people in my little part of the world are now interested in the national parks and are interested in what's happening in them, and have this desire to see all the parks and experience the parks while they can. I read an article, I think in the Atlantic in the spring, about management of the parks. And the idea was proposed that the management of the parks be turned back to Indigenous tribes. And I wonder if you had, how you feel about the management of the parks, and if you would have, I don't know, just what your ideas are on how the parks are being managed, and are we going in the right direction in terms of trying to protect them? I'm obviously so happy that Deb Haaland is there in charge of that nationally now, but just wondered what your sense was about the parks.
Well, the new director is Indigenous. What's his name? They just appointed him. And for the last several years, they didn't have funding. They didn't have money to hire, the help they needed to run the parks. So it's really hard to judge it at this point, until they can get it back on track. But I think that was more of the issue, was underfunding the parks. And once the pandemic hit, everybody decided to go to the parks, so their visitation went up, but their funding went down. So a lot of them sustained some damage, from like in Joshua Tree, people were chopping down Joshua trees. It was just, there wasn't enough people. And I've been in a few parks. There's hardly any visible rangers anywhere. So I think that's going to help in the management. Plus the new appointed director is I'm sorry, I can't remember his name.
I'll look it up.
But he's from Oregon, along the Columbia River, the tribes that are there along the Columbia. So I know the parks have a strong relationship with all the tribes and Indigenous peoples of the regions that they're in.
Is
And I
that
think
Charles
now-
Sams? Sandy,
Yes,
Charles Sams, Chuck
yes,
Sams, yeah.
yes, Chuck Sams. So I think we're going to see that elevated, I believe now too.
That is going to be,
They're invited to sit at the table, and they do help make decisions within the parks right now. So
that's going to be a worldwide trend, because the UN Conference on Biodiversity, one of their strategies is to return worldwide wilderness lands to care of Indigenous peoples. So it's not just our national parks, but hopefully we'll see that worldwide.
Be wonderful.
Yeah, it's an interesting trend in reading about some historically, how there were decisions in certain parks that they needed to remain pristine and no humans could be there. And just the impact of that, especially on those indigenous groups, that was their homelands and they were living, in relationship with that land and having, kind of as a keystone species in some cases, having an important impact on its biodiversity and its health. So yeah, Michelle, I hope you're right. We're all voting for that. So good. Any other comments, questions that anybody has? Okay. So I want to know, you're talking about a couple of your other books and things. So what's next for you in your life? Like if you've already been living this minimalist life, and yet you could still remove however many items you said when you went through your minimalist month or whatever that was. Like what do you see as kind of, I see this, Sandi, that you're embodying this life. You're not just preaching about it or writing about it or reading somebody else's articles about it, but you're actually embracing, and not just embracing it intellectually or financially. It's who you are. This is how you live, and this is how you think. And so what do you see as your evolution? Because I know you're going to be, you're on the path still. You didn't hit home, and you're going to stay there, right? Am I right?
We can't decide where that would be. So
Okay.
as much as I want to have a real office, yeah, we just can't decide. We pull out the atlas every other day. Where would we live? It's hard to do, but
How do you decide?
it's really hard to where you'd want to, because you guys have probably been in your region. I grew up in St. Louis area, but our whole family's scattered, so I don't have a home to call. If you think of home as your family, where your family is, they're all over, so I get to go see them. But yeah, my next chapter, I don't know. Right now we're going to eventually have to stop, because this is not easy living. I don't recommend it for just anybody. It's not easy. So, as we get older, we're going to have to stop. So that's my next chapter, is trying to figure out where that is. And then internally here, it's taken years. It takes years to transition from, let's just look at the bathroom, for example, getting rid of all the toxins in the bathroom. And I'm getting close, but it's not like I'm going to go in there and throw everything out. It's like getting rid of a car and buying an electric vehicle just because. I mean, we run our vehicles till they don't run anymore, and then we'll get a next one. So anyway, in the bathroom, I've managed to go from having bottles of shampoo and all that, soaps and everything, down to, of soap and shampoo. So there's no more toxins in there. So going through each room and think, well, this stuff, and a lot of you may have done that already, but it's a long process, and even dish soap, and the plastic. So you look at it through a lens of toxicity. For me, that was first. So I started making my own stuff. And then I looked at, now it's getting rid of plastic. Any plastic that I can get rid of, I want to get rid of. And I've learned that it's impossible to get rid of everything 100%. It really is impossible. It's just, you can't find it, or you can't afford it, because a lot of it is expensive. But anyway, so internal, that's what I've been working on internally, is cleaning up my space from toxins and plastics.
Cool.
And then eventually, I hope we find a place to plop.
Well, Sandi, we're right up at time. Can you
Mm-hmm.
let people know how to contact you and the best way for them to purchase your book? How would you like to do that?
Well, if you want to share the link that you have too.
Yeah. Oh, shoot.
Because we've started, and if you guys know of any others, but I've decided I give an affiliate link to environmental nonprofits. So if they, if we have a talk and you want to sell books, then the group gets a percentage of that. So we can share that link. It's on Amazon. If you do Kindle book or electronic, it's on there. You could just search my name, Sandi Sturm, Sandi with an I. And,
Found it. Yep, I got it right here.
Paperback and Kindle, and Sammy has a link where she would benefit. And then as part of that, there's the weekly email option too. When you go to the link that Sammy has. So, yeah.
Great.
Well, that's
Yeah,
it.
and when we get the recording, when we publish the recording out, we'll put those links in there too, and people can kind of pick and choose what feels right for them. So I just want to thank you for your time, for your heart, for your intellect, for your career, for, it's just such a wealth of depth and understanding, and I don't know, it's good stuff. You've put some good stuff out, so thank you, Sandi.
I'm
I
so
admire
happy I
the
met you.
I admire the courage that it takes to lead a lifestyle the way that you do and make the decisions that you do. Kudos to you and your husband too for going along for the ride.
Thank you.
Well,
He's
thanks
still
very
here.
much. He's still here. Good for him. We all applaud him. So everyone, watch for your email in the next couple of days. You'll have the link, and feel free to share it with everybody that you know. Great holiday gifts. So thank you, Sandi. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.